Hi everyone, my name is Jacqueline and my partner is Jasmine Manso, and we are here presenting Leigh Syndrome. Leigh syndrome is a rare neurometabolic disorder. It's part of a group of genetic disorders that disrupt how the body uses or produces energy from food. As a result of poor energy metabolism, organs such as the brain and heart that require higher energy production are affected. Leigh syndrome is also known as subacute necrotizing encephalomyelopathy. The disease was discovered by a neuropsychiatrist, Archibald Dennis Leigh, who discovered the disorder in 1951. Leigh syndrome affects the central nervous system, which includes the brain, the spinal cord, and the optic nerve. The symptoms of Leigh syndrome usually begin between the ages of 3 months and 2 years, with some rare cases of adult onset symptoms. Some of the first noticeable symptoms are loss of head control or loss of motor skills, as well as a poor sucking ability. Once symptoms are observed, they do progress rapidly and can include symptoms such as optic atrophy, difficulty swallowing, decreased muscle tone, as we can see in the photo in the upper right-hand corner, involuntary muscle contractions, severe breathing problems, thickening of the heart muscles, and lactic acidosis. It is estimated that Leigh syndrome happens in 1 in 40,000 live births worldwide. It has been found to be more common in some populations. For example, a region in Quebec, Canada reports 1 in 2,000 cases, as well as the Faroe Islands with 1 in 1,700 cases. The average life expectancy of the classical form of Leigh syndrome, which develops during infancy, is between the ages of 2 to 7 years of age. Leigh syndrome is reported to affect males and females in equal numbers. Leigh syndrome can be inherited in 2 ways, the first of which is a mutation in the mitochondrial DNA. About 20% of cases of Leigh syndrome are associated with mutations in the mitochondrial DNA. This form of Leigh syndrome is likely to occur in about 1 in 100,000 to 1 in 140,000 births. It has also been referred to as the maternal inherited Leigh syndrome, since only egg cells coming from the mother hold mitochondria. These mutations in the mitochondria are caused by a deficiency in mitochondrial energy metabolism. As mentioned by Jasmine, Leigh syndrome can be inherited in different ways depending on the location of the responsible gene in each person. It is most commonly inherited in the autosomal recessive matter. That means that an affected person must have a mutation in both copies of the responsible gene in each cell. Affected people inherit 1 mutated copy of the gene from each parent, who is referred as a carrier. Carriers of this autosomal recessive condition typically do not show any signs or symptoms. They are unaffected. When 2 carriers of an autosomal recessive condition have children, each child has a 25% chance to be affected, 50% chance to be unaffected, and be carriers like each parent, or 25% chance to be unaffected and not a carrier. One of the reasons why there's such a small number of affected individuals with mutations in the nuclear DNA, it's because it's being inherited in the X-linked recessive pattern. This condition has a pattern of inheritance when the mutated gene is located on the X chromosome, which is one of the 2 sex chromosomes, which means it's most likely going to be passed on by the mother than by the father, who only carries 1 X chromosome link. The current methods of diagnosing Leigh syndrome include measuring lactate levels in the blood or the cerebral spinal fluid, This is typically done by taking a blood or urine sample to measure for raised levels of lactate in the body. As well, it can also be done by taking a sample of the fluid surrounding the brain and measuring for increased lactate levels as well. They also use brain imaging like CT or an MRI, where they look for lesions or damaged tissue in the brain, which is a result of poor energy metabolism in the body, which leads to damage to the brain. And they also use genetic testing. This helps to determine if the pattern of inheritance or the type of Leigh syndrome is a mitochondrial mutation or a mutation in the nuclear DNA. So here we see an MRI image that shows the deterioration of the brain in the span of about 2 years. So if we look at the first image, image A, we see just a few lesions. And then if we look at the final image, image C, we see how there is a great decrease in the brain tissue with lots of white matter. So this just shows how quickly someone with Leigh syndrome, their brain deteriorates pretty rapidly. There are no known therapies or treatments for Leigh syndrome. Part of the reason for the lack of treatment is because the disease is so rare. Another reason is because patients often die in early childhood, there is no opportunity for any long-term treatment trials, leading to a lack of research for the use of any specific treatments. The most common treatment is the use of thiamine or vitamin B1, which help convert carbs to energy. This treatment may provide temporary improvement of symptoms, or it can help to slow a progression of the disease. Typically, a diet high in fat and low in carbohydrates is also recommended for individuals with Leigh syndrome. Additionally, an individual with Leigh syndrome may have a team of specialists treating the symptoms that are exhibited. For example, an individual with heart problems would be followed by a cardiologist. An individual with optic atrophy would be followed by an ophthalmologist. In this diagram, we can see the mitochondrial DNA mutations affect transcription, translation, enzyme complex, biochemistry, and the cellular phenotype at different levels. If you can see, we start with 2 normal cells. One of the cells has a mutant mitochondria in it, versus the other cell has less of the mutant mitochondrial DNA in it. When it translates, for some reason, it translates differently. The one that has that mutated mitochondrial cells divides into 3 different cells, versus the one that has the normal mitochondrial cells divides into 2 even cells, which makes that person normal. It makes carriers of this Leigh's disease, but they are not affected or show any type of symptoms, versus the person that has the 3 cells with the mutant mitochondrial DNA in it. This person does have Leigh syndrome and does show symptoms. At the bottom of this diagram, we can see the energy production process versus oxidative may lead to the formation of reactive oxygen species in the electron transport chain. The oxidative stress condition could further lead to the destruction of macromolecules such as lipids, proteins, and DNA. And we have included a short YouTube clip where you can see the progression of Leigh disease and how it affects children.